Well, today was a toss-up to whether to talk about the four foundations of mindfulness or the four divine abodes. Seems I'm into the fours right now. So we're going to go with the four foundations of mindfulness, and I'll discuss the four divine abodes at a future date. Four foundations of mindfulness. These are actually meditations one does on oneself. They are, in order, mindfulness or contemplation of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mind, and then mindfulness of mental objects. So we'll start with the mindfulness of the body. Now, actually, before I start, let me explain something. These contemplations, these meditations, are used in both Theravadan and Mahayana. Once again, the Mahayana is the school of the Bodhisattvas, and the Theravadins are the school of the Shravakas, or the people who have heard the truth of Buddha and decided to follow the path to awakening, but for their own sake. Sounds selfish. It's not. It's much more expansive than that. But that's one whole phase of Buddhism, the Theravadan phase. And then there's the Mahayana phase, the phase of the school of the Bodhisattvas, the idea that, yes, we all work towards awakening, but really only so we can help others awake. Our personal enlightenment is a necessary thing to really teach anyone anything, but that is not the primary goal. The primary goal is to awaken everyone. So having said that, the Theravadins, this is one of their primary practices. These meditations are something they go through on a regular basis. It's just part of their practice. They do it all the time. And we do this occasionally, but is not considered of primary importance in terms of regularly doing it. So, mindfulness or contemplation of the body. Now, what is that all about? That's understanding the physical thing that our consciousness is housed in. Being able to understand what is going on with it at any given time, or in the case of this meditation, to actually sit down and while we're meditating, be very aware of the processes going on in the body. And this is really pretty straightforward, as you might imagine. If we are walking, we're mindful of the fact that we're walking. The body is walking. If we're standing, we're conscious of the fact that we're standing. If we're sitting, we're sitting. It's a contemplation of all the body elements. If we're sitting there kind of wiped out because we've been sitting maybe for a while and our leg hurts or our back hurts, we try not to look at this as an annoyance, but simply as information coming in. Awareness of the body. Yes, I'm sitting here trying to still my mind, but my knees are killing me. So we don't reject the fact that our knees hurt or our back hurts or some part of our body hurts. We need to be aware as we sit there of simply the processes that the body is going through. Awareness of what the body is doing. So rather than reject or be angry at the fact that our back is killing us during our meditation, we're simply sitting there and being aware of it. Sounds like a simple thing, but it's amazing how often we go through life without being aware of what's going on, more often annoyed or distracted by what the body is doing, when in fact true mindfulness asks us to recognize and understand and see, feel what the body is doing and be aware of it. One of the most primary aspects of the body, both in this meditation and in life, is to be aware of our breathing. Breathing is one of those unique, nearly unique, bodily processes that we have some control over. If we decide not to breathe or to hold our breath, we can do it. We can stop the breath. But if we ignore it, then we keep on breathing anyway. So it's an automatic thing that keeps us alive, but we can hold our breath for a while and stop the process. So it gives us kind of a unique look at part of the body that's very important, but that takes care of itself when we're not paying attention to it. So it really pays to pay attention to the breathing, especially when we're in a meditative state. The breath is very important. It's the one thing that's always with us that we can have some ability to concentrate on. Like if we sat there and said, all right, we're going to sit and try to meditate. Let's concentrate on the liver. You know, not easy for most of us. Even the heartbeat, sometimes your heart beats so quietly that you really don't feel it, and you certainly don't hear it. But the breath is always there, so we use the breath as an object of concentration because it's always with us, and it fluctuates. So we can be sitting there and realize that the breath is maybe heavy and deep, or it's shallow and quick. Each one of those can suggest a certain state of mind, which is something else that we can delve into at that point. But we watch the breath. We don't try to control it. We see what it's doing, observing it. And of course, the breath is very seminal, and for a lot of reasons in Buddhism, because it is our connection with the outside world, sort of like eating is. As we breathe, we're constantly bringing in oxygen and exchanging elements, oxygen not the only one, with everything else out there. It's our connection with everything that's going on. So we spend time in a bodily meditation, in this meditation, in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but also in a regular meditation, just watching the breath, watching the body expressing itself. And the aim is to see the body objectively as something that's prone to change, prone to decay, and because of that, it's ultimately lacking a permanent self. In other words, these are meditations about a physical object, ourselves, which sometimes we hold to such high degree. But in a meditation, realizing that this essence of ourselves, this bodily essence of ourselves, is really something that is constantly changing. And I've talked about that before, the fact that over about a 2-year period, there's not a cell in your body that's the same it was when you started. So the body is always changing, always morphing, and ultimately the causes and conditions stop that process or slow it, and then ultimately stop it, and we die. So the body is certainly an impermanent aspect of us, which negates any concept that we have any degree of permanency. The second foundation of mindfulness is the mindfulness of feelings. This is expressed real simply. Does it feel good? Does it feel bad? Or is it somewhere in the middle, just kind of neutral? Now, we always tend to gravitate towards feelings that are pleasurable. That's how we build up this large body of things that we like. It feels good, it smells good, it tastes good, it gives our senses pleasure. So we're mindful of the fact that I like this because it feels good or tastes good. Or we recognize that certain feelings are unpleasant and doesn't feel good or doesn't taste good or doesn't smell good. And they're aware of these as well. Remember, not just aware of how they feel, but in a grander sense, recognizing that those very feelings are what starts to build the next state, mindfulness of mind, and ultimately mindfulness of mental objects. So whether it's pleasant or neutral or unpleasant, we determine a whole range of likes and dislikes, therefore setting our mind in certain patterns. Now, once again, mindfulness of feelings suggests not a permanent self, because we see how quickly these things can change. One day we may like beets, the next day we'll get them and we don't like the way they were prepared. So yes, I like beets. No, I don't like beets. Or it could be the mood that has changed, or your taste buds, or what you had in your mouth previously as to whether a food may or may not taste good. So these feelings, whether something is pleasant or unpleasant, change constantly. And as a lesson, this teaches us that feelings are fleeting. They're based on us right then, right now. But since we're always changing, always evolving, like the body is always changing and evolving, our feelings can change and evolve. So if we're these permanent things with an essence, that bespeaks the idea that it's an unchanging thing. And by recognizing how the body changes and how the feelings change, we can realize that we are not an essence, we are a process, and that we're constantly changing. There is no permanent self. Then there's mindfulness of mind. Here we get a little bit more complicated, but it comes from the first two that brings us to this state of mind. We've got a body which is impacted by external forces that we interpret as either pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant, and these begin to create our emotions. So mindfulness of mind is recognizing those states of mind, those states of emotions. So when we're aware that we have a dislike towards something or someone, it's that very awareness that we're watching for. I am aware that my state of mind currently is afflicted by either a hate or a love, or it's filled with a passion for something, or it is passionless, or it's in a mind that's filled with aggression, or it's non-aggression, or it's even a mind filled with delusion, or you're going through a period of clarity, or a moment of clarity, whatever, and so it's a mind that's not filled with delusion. So in other words, we're looking at the mind and the emotions of the mind and recognizing that this too is part of who we are. We have a mind that gets caught up in emotions. So it's very important that we then recognize those emotional aspects of our mind. How does our mind work? Why is it feeling this way? That's not even the question during this meditation. This is an examination for perhaps another time. What we are concerned with now is simply observation. We're observing that right now my mind has a particular emotional state. Now this pops up a lot in meditation. It pays to pay attention to it. We could be sitting there trying to meditate, trying to calm our mind and not think of anything. But of course the mind is constantly active, so things start coming up. And quite often we can feel like, geez, I don't really want to be here. I'm just not getting anywhere. I have temporarily at least no faith in sitting here and trying to clear my mind. So rather than just consider it a washout that I'm not doing it, I'm not meditating, we can observe those aspects of our mind that are getting in the way. Boredom is an emotional state. You're sitting there bored, and so of course the meditation is not working. Why are you bored? Well, boredom, like I said, is a form of an emotional state, just like anger, love, and some of these others. We're finding, rather than a mind free of thoughts that are dragging us in certain directions, our mind is very much wrapped up in that. So we are gravitating towards a feeling somewhere in our skull, somewhere in our mind. This feeling has got our attention. And again, we're observing that. We're not getting down on ourselves because our meditation practice is not working to where we want it to work, but we're recognizing those factors, those parts of our mind that are intruding in this process. So we're not really dismissing these, ever. This is a part of us, this is a part of our mind, and this is the observation of that part of our mind that allows us to recognize how we operate. So we find that just looking at the body, looking at our feelings, which is as simple as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, and then looking at the emotional states that most of us have going in our mind all the time, is this examination of who we are, what this self, so-called self, is doing. What is it made of? How does it think? How does it make the decisions it does? We learn all this just by observing the fact that we do these things. We do make choices. We do have emotions. And by concentrating on those very emotions, we begin to see how the emotions can actually be assuaged, can be just not ignored, but not being caught up in and carried away by, because we begin to recognize how these processes work, and so we're no longer slaves to them. And the fourth foundation of mindfulness is called the mindfulness of mental objects. And this is a specifically Buddhist concept, if I may say. In this aspect of the four foundations, where the mental objects actually constitute the Buddhist truths, the dharmas with the big D's. We're conscious of the Four Noble Truths. We're conscious of impermanence. We're consciousness of the hindrances to practice and all the other Buddhist truths. So what this means is that we've gone through the first three, recognizing what this lump of us is doing at any given moment, and becoming more and more aware and understanding more of the processes of how the body works. But being mindfulness of mental objects brings us into a different realm. We now understand. This is where we actually take the time to understand why our emotions are working as they are. Why feeling things that are either good or bad can bring these emotions up. And why feelings of good or bad or neutral are an outcrop of the fact that we have a body. All of this comes into play when you're recognizing the Buddhist truths. So when we think or feel or recognize that our mind is in a certain state, if we go to the Buddhist truths, the mental objects that underlie a practitioner's approach to understanding oneself, we use these Buddhist truths, these mental objects, these guideposts, to understand the body, the feelings, and the mind. For example, in the Four Noble Truths, life is suffering, life is discontent. We've had a few discussions on this. This is probably the most seminal part of Buddhist truths, the Four Noble Truths. That's what it all started from on Buddha's on his awakening. His first thoughts, his first realizations were over the Four Noble Truths: that life is suffering, that it is such because we have attachments and desire for things and people and outcomes, and that we suffer because that desire for what we want may temporarily be satisfied, but it always comes up again, always looking for the next generation of things that'll make us happy. So we're continually striving to find that. And the third noble truth states that there is a way of avoiding this trap. And the fourth is the Eightfold Path, which is the path that allows us to see clear enough to avoid that trap. So this is how the four Buddhist truths, the mental objects, start to inform us on how those other mindfulness moments of the body and the feelings and the mind all combine to create a self that's inherently discontent. I know in the West we have a hard time dealing with that. we say we have a pretty good life and all that. But examine it sometime. Why, if you're a happy person and not suffering and not discontent, do we have days or hours of depression? Why do we feel hurt? Why do we feel maligned? Why do we feel anger? Why do we feel greed and lust and all of these things? They come from not recognizing the fundamental truths and how we're put together and how we work. So in these four meditations, the meditation on the body, meditation on the feelings, meditation on the mind, and then a meditation on those mental objects, those Buddhist truths, our recognition of who we are gets clearer and clearer. Our recognition of the traps that we get sucked into and the suffering that we cause for ourselves becomes clearer and clearer. So we find ourselves understanding this lump of flesh and bone and blood and sinew, and recognize its relationship with all of life. And we recognize how we've built up this thing called self and how shaky a foundation it's built on. So in a word, mindfulness can be explained as a combination of bare intention and clear comprehension. Those first three especially. It's simply bare attention. I recognize I am angry. I recognize I am breathing. Or I feel a pain in my right knee. It's a clear comprehension of the processes that bring us to this concept of self. So that's a quick survey of the four foundations of mindfulness. Give it a shot. If you've got some time and you feel like meditating, start with the simplest one, the meditation on the body. Just sit and survey it. Allow the certain aspects of the body that you can feel, and you'd be surprised if you put your concentration on a certain area, you can almost feel the blood rushing through certain areas. You can feel the sensation of the air on your skin or the heat from something on your leg. Nothing magical about it, just awareness. and then to sit and contemplate one's feelings. Why do I like something? Do I not like something? Is it feeling pleasant or unpleasant? We can usually figure out that in a few moments, just sitting, thinking about just about anything. Think about a person. Let them flash into your mind. Is it a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling? Or a situation, or a food, or anything? Exercise that aspect of our mind. Recognize those sensations that we're feeling. And especially mindfulness of our emotions. If we had to handle any given moment what emotion we were going through rather than reacting to it, then the reaction becomes informed and it becomes an action. Reacting may be good in sports or something like that, where you're able to quickly size up the situation and react positively. But when we're talking about dealing with other people and dealing with life, an action is much more of a profound and necessary endeavor than is a reaction, because then we have no control. We're coming out of an emotional state that allows us or forces us to react instead of taking the situation in, clearly seeing it for what it is, and act. So the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Good to have with you at all times. And just a little note here. I saw a movie the other day. It's a pretty new movie to DVD, I believe. It's based on a book that I think is like 20 years old called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And the movie is called Peaceful Warrior. And it looks like another sports flick. It's about this guy who works as he's a gymnast, and he works out on the rings. And it's got fantastic photography, and it goes well beyond any sports concept. Nick Nolte plays this old garage attendant that this young guy bumps into. And it's very interesting. Everything out of Nick Nolte's mouth are things that I just said. The word Buddhism was never used in the movie, but I could have been sitting there listening to my abbot go through the Buddhist dharmas, because virtually everything Nick Nolte said about life, about this kid's approach to his passion and other people, was clearly Buddhist. So if there's anyone out there that would like to know some Buddhist truths and don't feel like sitting listening to somebody lecture, it's a very entertaining movie, wonderful photography, great job of photographing, and a good story, good acting, but some very profound insights that you don't see in just your average Hollywood movie. So give it a shot. I enjoyed it very much. So until next week, where we may talk about another 4, might talk about the 4 divine abodes. Enjoy the week and live it in peace. Bye.